All right, everybody. So I want to go ahead and talk a little bit to you today about assessment, classroom assessment, and what that is, why we do it, how we do it, and where I want to go moving forward. I notice as a department we're kind of all over the board with this, and I think it's something that we really need to be on the same page with. So I think just having a basic understanding of it and having a discussion of it here will help us. So watch this, and then be prepared to discuss this a little bit further when we have our meeting as a whole at the begin service. So let's go ahead and get started. First off, what is assessment? It's the collection, evaluation, and use of information to help teachers make decisions that improve student learning. So that's a weird definition, right? Because at first you think, well, it's just testing, but it's not just testing. It's how we measure learning, and it tells us how effective our lesson was and how well students have grasped the material. So that's really the dual purpose of assessment. So it's a little bit more than just questions and answers, right? And that's kind of the mindset that I'm trying to change a little bit, is that assessment doesn't necessarily have to mean an exam. And we're going to talk more about that here in a minute. So when should classroom assessments take place? The answer is actually not just at the end. It's all throughout the process. We can actually assess before, during, and after instruction. Like before and during, yeah, even before and during. Before learning gives us a sense of where students are. And you don't know how far they go unless you know where the starting point is. You have to have that start to know where the end is. So pre-assessment is actually a part of the process. It's hard to do in our classrooms, but it is possible, and it's something I encourage you to experiment with. During learning is hugely important. These are known as formative assessments. See the quote here. It's what teachers do when they obtain information about student understanding during instruction and provide feedback that includes correctives to help students learn. And that can be done formally or informally, and we'll talk a little bit more about methods here in a few minutes, but that's formative assessment. So just to kind of go back here, there's different terms for this. Assessment for learning, these are formative assessments, and assessments as learning are also a type of formative assessments, and assessments of learning, these are what we call our summative assessments. These are our big tests at the end, and they're the ones you may be a little bit more familiar with as far as what actually assessments are. Let's move forward then. So how do I know what to assess? The good news is this is the easiest question to answer because Del Tech tells us. The decision's already been made by department chairs working college-wide to develop the syllabus. And the syllabus is actually where we find this information, right? This is our core course performance objectives, or CCPOs, or more specifically our measurable performance objectives, or MPOs. So like it says there, it's in the syllabus. All you have to do is look for it. The hardest part is sticking to it. Now, quick caveat, I understand some of the things in the syllabus are a little wacky. We're working to improve those. It's a constant revision process. I have my eyes on it now. If there's anything that's in a syllabus that concerns you, please let me know. If you feel like there should be more of a particular topic or issue in the syllabus, let me know. If you feel like it's not properly aligned, let me know. We'll try and get that worked out here moving forward in the next couple of years. So how do I assess learning in my classroom? There's no one-size-fits-all answer to that, and that's good and bad news, right? The idea here is that it really depends on the subject. A history assessment doesn't look like a psychology assessment, doesn't look like a sociology assessment necessarily. There's different ways to do it depending on your topic. There's also different ways depending on if it's a formative or summative assessment. So some formative assessment considerations. First off, formative assessment isn't the quiz, it's what happens afterwards. The key to formative assessment is getting the information, using it to adapt your teaching in your instruction so that you fix the problems that you identify with the formative assessment. It's a process. So a couple of things to note here. Formative assessments do not have to be graded. You don't have to give a grade for everything. You don't have to collect every paper you hand out. That's kind of a mindset change that needs to occur. I think sometimes we feel so pressured to grade everything that students do. That doesn't always have to happen. They don't have to be formal either. It can be a quick raise of the hands. It can be a Kahoot. It can be any of the dozens of other methods of assessing learning that can take place. Simple show of hands, right? A post-it note stuck on the board up front. What do you get? What do you don't? Things like that. It should provide meaningful feedback, though. Not always, but if it's something that is turned in, then feedback is good. Think of it as like a student turning in a rough draft, and you write all these notes and all this stuff on how they can fix it, but you don't put a grade on it. You just hand it back to them. That would be hugely impactful as far as student learning. It could be a pretest that you give before their actual test. I know some of you guys do that already, and that's great to give them a sense of where they are and give them feedback on their answers. This is time consuming. It's not always easy, but it's what's best for students, and that's really should be what drives what we do. It should promote interest in learning. It should include some praise. Even if they give you something that's not real good, find something good to say about it, and then give them areas for improvement. We're not trying to beat them down at this point. That's the formative part, so we're trying to help them kind of move along. It should not be used punitively. Giving extra work as punishment, it's kind of more of a secondary, even elementary school thing, but it just isn't bad practice overall. It may be graded. There's mixed scholarship on this, but I think it may be graded, especially here where we're trying to kind of balance out their grades, right? So some in-class assignments being graded is not necessarily a bad thing. It might help some of the students who struggle a little bit more on the summative assessments. However, this is really more about learning and measurement as opposed to a true evaluation. And it can also include self-assessment. Students reflecting on what they know and what they don't is impactful for them. And that kind of metacognition, thinking about how they're thinking about things, all that is hugely part of the process, and it's part of the formative process that we're talking about now. Jumping down to summative, right? There's some other things that we should consider for summative assessments as well. First off, it should be designed before the formative assessments and before the lessons are designed. We begin with the end in mind. We design the summative assessments first based on our objectives, based on our CCPOs and our MPOs. It should be aligned to those things too, obviously. It should measure the learning of the objectives and not tangential skills or topics. So if you give an essay, assignment or assessment, which is fine, grade that essay based on the merits of the objective, not on the writing. We are not English teachers in our department. And the students, frankly, don't care about every little comma that you add or every capitalization fix that you make. You don't have to grade all that necessarily. What you do need to grade is how well their assessment aligns with the objectives, how well they meet the objective, or if they don't, why they don't, and how they can improve, or how maybe what we did to get them there can improve better. That's part of the assessment process, right? It doesn't have to be a multiple choice test. It doesn't have to be a test bank. It doesn't have to be matching or true false. It doesn't have to be any of those things, not even formal essays. In fact, I encourage non-traditional assessment methods. I think that's totally fine. I think that's something that will help our students, and it might make things a little more interesting for us too, to be honest with you. It should require higher order thinking, not just rote memorization. We'll talk a little bit more about why here in a few minutes. But I think gone are the days when it's just, which of the following is the best term to match this definition. We should move beyond that at this point. This is college. They're getting ready for the real world. And yes, they need to know stuff. I don't discount the importance of knowledge, but I do think that as far as assessment, we need to have them apply that knowledge and demonstrate that they know that knowledge by applying it. And by maybe doing authentic assessments, so that would be applications to real life, things like that, as opposed to just rote memorization, matching, multiple choice, etc. It can be a performance or a speech or a presentation or a video like I'm making right now, or a project of some sort. All of these things are still assessments, and they can be in place of exams, in place of a midterm, in place of a final if you prefer. That is okay with me. So think outside the box a little bit. Think outside the bubble, right? The little bubbles from multiple choice. Think outside of that a little bit now. So why should we rethink assessment, right? Well, comfortable isn't always correct. I know a lot of us are kind of stuck in this mind frame of, well, this is how I learned and I did okay. And that may be true for you. But there's a lot of students that were left behind because of that type of thinking and because of that way that might have been really good. The second reason really is that the world is changing. Any basic knowledge or fact that we need is at our fingertips. Look at the bear, right? People think I have a giant wealth of knowledge, but I'm really just better at Googling. The smartest people are the people that know how to use the tools at their disposal at this point. But then they have to apply that information. And that's what the workplace demands really are for our students now, too. It's not that they're living Google machines. I mean, there's a place for that, I guess. But the reality is that they're able to use the information. They're able to come up with creative solutions. They're able to collaborate with colleagues to create a product. These are the skills that really need to be assessed along with the content that we're assessing. The reality, too, just to kind of be blunt here, is that the test banks are available online. And so we need to consider that as we move forward. So those test banks are really a concern because if you go in and Google any question that you pull from a test bank, what you're going to find is probably not only those questions specifically, but also the answers paired up with them on something like Quizlet or something along those lines. So just be cautious as you go to build your assessments that you're cognizant of that, and maybe it should motivate you to kind of change how we assess a little bit and relook at how we do assessment within our classes. So finally, zoom in there. So where do we go from here, right? First off, know that the college is developing assessment measure menus for each course. That's something that's in process. Every time we revise a curriculum for a course, we're supposed to provide an assessment measure menu with it. They're not always done and not always perfect, but that is something that's in progress. That's not going to be prescriptive, but rather give you some choices. Classroom assessments will still be instructor designed in this department. Specifically. As of right now, I've not received a mandate that we go to uniform assessments yet. I don't plan to mandate that unless it comes down. That said, we need to be sure that we are on the same page with assessment, that we're thinking about it the same way, and that a psychology class is a psychology class, that you're being assessed the same way. And the way we do that, the way we achieve that, is by aligning our assessments to the objectives. So that's something I really want to make sure that we're doing as we move forward. I would like to review your own assessment practice. I would like you to review your own assessment practices, rather. And then once you're comfortable and made any revisions or changes based on what we just talked about, or if you come and talk to me personally, then please submit a sample assessment to me to review and to give you some feedback on. Really, this is kind of us assessing ourselves, right? There's tons of resources online. I'd be happy to show you some additional resources. I'd be happy to meet with you to set you up with CCIT. I know they're actually offering a course. I think it's called Advanced Assessment. I'm not sure if it's in the fall. I think in the spring that one's coming along. So there's lots of options for you to kind of expand your repertoire here and to really develop assessments that work better for you, to measure learning, and for the students to gauge what they're really supposed to know, and to make sure that it is aligned with the CCPOs and the MPOs within each course. So, be like the cat. Don't fear the winds of change. Don't get stuck in the mindset that we've always done it one way. And let's think of some new and creative ways to assess learning within our classes to do this in the most effective way possible, in the way that works best for everyone involved. So I look forward to talking with you more about this as we meet together in August. And hopefully you can start to think about some changes that you want to put into place. And if you want to talk to me before then, you know where I am. Thank you.